Is this process better than a trust? And if yes, how long does it take to take place? This is in regards to a Ladybird deed, which is a way that you can transfer your real estate to one or more beneficiaries outside the court process called probate, which is also a reason that people will often get living trusts in place. So a living trust is a document. It's essentially an agreement as to what's going to happen to your assets after you pass away, and your assets can actually be transferred into the trust and owned by the trust, and by doing that, they can avoid probate. So the question is this Ladybird deed, is it better than a trust? And if it is, how long does it take to get one in place? So is it better than trust is kind of a loaded question. And I say that because it depends on several factors, whether it would be best for your real estate to go into a trust potentially, or to just use a Ladybird deed. But just for the basics, one thing that has to be fully understood here is the Ladybird deed is only going to apply to real estate that you own. So if you own one property, let's say as a primary residence, and maybe you just have a couple bank accounts that already have beneficiaries on them, or they're joint bank accounts, you're not super concerned about them, and your main asset is this one piece of property, then maybe a Ladybird deed by itself might be a sufficient estate planning tool for you. And that's because the Ladybird deed will make sure that your real estate, your prized asset, can pass down to whoever you want it to pass to outside of the probate process. So this can be a very effective estate planning tool, especially for people who have only a few assets, the house being one of them. Oftentimes the house is one of the most valued assets that they have, very maybe simplified estate, and they don't want their beneficiaries to have to go through probate, which does happen if all you have is a will. So if you have a last will and testament that says who the house goes to, the house still has to go through a probate process before it can pass down to the person in a will, which is how we get trust. So oftentimes, instead of just having a will, people choose to get a living trust in place, because what a living trust can do is prevent having your assets go through probate. The difference between the Ladybird deed and the trust is that a trust can cover all sorts of assets. So financial assets, if you have stocks, bonds, CDs, investment accounts, retirement accounts, these things can be tied to your trust. You can even connect or tie a business to your trust so that a business does not have to go through probate to pass on to whoever you want it to pass on to. So if you have different types of assets and you want these assets to go to various beneficiaries, it's often necessary to get a living trust in place so that these beneficiaries can avoid the probate process. Again, the Ladybird deed is only going to cover real estate, whereas the trust can cover all sorts of other assets. Pretty much anything else that you own, there's a way to either transfer it to the trust or assign it to the trust, connect it to the trust somehow. And by doing this, what you're doing is making sure, one, if you have lots of beneficiaries, and it might be kind of complicated, it simplifies it by putting it into a trust and giving someone control to just sort of gather up those assets, potentially sell them and divide them among the beneficiaries. Or if you have minor beneficiaries, it's beneficial to have the trust in place so that you're able to have a holding spot for them until they reach a certain age. So there's all sorts of reasons why you may need a trust, and that may be the proper vehicle. Now, even if you get a trust, your trust can work together with a Ladybird deed, meaning the trust itself can be a beneficiary of a Ladybird deed. And we do this often when clients have a mortgage on the property. This way the property can stay in their name while they're alive. It doesn't change title at all. They keep their title insurance, but after they pass away, it deposits directly into their trust because the trust is named as the beneficiary on the Ladybird deed. So you get the same result. It ends up in the trust. It avoids probate, but there may be reasons, and more than just the mortgage, but there could be reasons during your lifetime that it makes sense to leave real estate in your name rather than transferring it directly into a trust. So the Ladybird deed is actually something that can work well with a trust. So essentially, to answer this question, if real estate is your only asset or the only asset that you're worried about, and maybe it's just going to one person and it's a simple sort of thing to do, then yeah, maybe the Ladybird deed is the way to go. However, if you have lots of assets or lots of beneficiaries, you're definitely going to want to consider the trust route. Now, the question as to how long does it take? The Ladybird deed can be drafted quickly. It's one document, it's one deed. It does have to be signed. It has to be notarized. And when it is signed, it has to be signed in the presence of two witnesses. There are certain formalities that need to be followed, certain things that have to take place in order for the deed to be considered legal under Florida law, and once it is signed, it should be recorded so that people are on notice of this deed. But that whole process, depending on who you're working with, what law firm you're working with, can take anywhere from 5 days to potentially a couple of weeks, but it's essentially a short process, to get the deed together, to have you sign it. The turnaround time for recording it may be a few days. So the whole process to have it completed, signed, recorded, and back to you shouldn't be any longer than, a week and a half to 2 weeks. Whereas a trust could take longer because there's more to consider and more that goes into it. All right, so I hope this answered the question. If you have any other questions about Ladybird deeds or trusts or the difference between them or anything to do with estate planning or elder law or probate and you're in Florida, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're at Cause Law Office, the non-stuffy attorneys, and the link is in my bio.